name Ian Watkins once filled stadiums, not courtrooms. Lead singer of the Welsh rock band Lostprophets. He was the face of early 2000s rebellion, a tattooed idol adored by millions across Britain and the US. But on September 21, 2012, police in Pontypridd, West Yorkshire, uncovered a story so depraved that even hardened investigators struggled to believe it. What began as a routine drug raid would explode into one of the darkest criminal cases in British music history, revealing a double life built on fame, manipulation, and unspeakable crimes. The media called it the fall of an icon, and Corregina, but the truth was far worse. It wasn't a fall, it was exposure. Tonight we reopen the case of Ian Watkins, not to sensationalize but to understand how a man worshipped by fans became a symbol of horror and how so many warnings were ignored for so long. Because this isn't just a story about one man, it's about the blind faith that let him thrive. Before his name became synonymous with infamy, Ian Watkins was a boy from Pontypridd, a small town in South Wales. Quiet streets, brick terraces, and a community where everyone knew everyone. Born in 1977, Ian grew up shy but ambitious. Teachers described him as creative, charming, the kind of student who could talk his way out of anything. He discovered music early, drawn to punk, metal, and hip-hop, the raw, restless energy of rebellion. In the late 1990s, with friends from the local scene, he formed a band that would soon redefine British rock, Lostprophets. Their sound, part punk, part anthemic alternative rock, exploded at just the right moment. The internet was connecting youth cultures, and Watkins, with his eyeliner and swagger, became their reluctant poster boy. By the mid-2000s, Lostprophets were selling out arenas across the UK, the US, and Japan. Hits like Last Train Home and Rooftops made them the voice of a generation teetering between angst and hope. Watkins had everything: fame, money, and the loyalty of millions. On stage, he was magnetic. Arms outstretched, drenched in sweat, screaming into the mic as fans cried and reached for him. Off stage, he was smooth, funny, the kind of rock star who didn't just play the part. He was the part. But there was something else, something few noticed at first. Behind the smirk and dark glasses, Watkins was always in control of his band, his image, his fans, especially his fans. Women described him as intoxicating, manipulative, impossible to say no to. In interviews, he joked about excess, about the rock and roll lifestyle, drugs, sex, chaos. It was all part of the myth. The media loved it. So did the fans. Lostprophets manager once said, Ian didn't just want to be famous, he wanted to be untouchable. And for a while he was. As the band toured globally, rumors began to circle. Drugs, disturbing conversations online, strange fan encounters. But in the world of celebrity, bad behavior was currency. It made headlines, it sold tickets, it kept the name alive. Watkins learned quickly that in the age of social media, being outrageous was almost a strategy. To the public, he remained the dark prince of alternative rock, dangerous, magnetic, and brilliant. Inside the industry, whispers grew louder. Crew members recalled hotel rooms trashed not from parties, but from paranoia. He became erratic, unpredictable, obsessed with control. One journalist later said, there was a sense of rot under the surface. But he was so charming that everyone looked away. Behind closed doors, the drugs weren't just for the high, they were for control. Cocaine, methamphetamine, anything that blurred the line between reality and power. Watkins' world was splitting in two, the public idol and the private addict. But fame can protect people, sometimes long enough for the damage to multiply. The more his behavior spiraled, the more the industry closed ranks to protect its star. And while fans screamed his name from the front rows, few could imagine what he was already hiding from them. Because what began as a performance was about to reveal something far darker and far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Behind the music and the noise, Ian Watkins wasn't just losing control, he was building an empire of it. By 2010, Lostprophets were global. Sold-out tours, platinum records, screaming fans. But off stage, Ian Watkins was no longer the charming frontman the world adored. He was unraveling. Bandmates began to notice his volatility, mood swings, paranoia, endless nights that bled into mornings. Cocaine and meth had replaced sleep, and his entourage was shrinking. Those who questioned him were pushed out, replaced by fans who would never say no. Online, Watkins had found a new kingdom, a world where anonymity blurred every boundary. He messaged fans directly, cultivated small private groups, and built a following of women who worshipped him. At first, it seemed like the usual Rockstar excess: explicit chats, late-night videos, the kind of behavior tabloids shrugged off. But what Watkins was doing went far beyond indulgence. He was manipulating fans into crossing lines they didn't understand, asking for things that should have sent alarms blaring. People saw the warning signs. Some even tried to report him. But in the world of fame and fandom, truth becomes negotiable. One fan wrote years later, "We joked that Ian was dangerous. We thought that made him cool. We had no idea how real that word was." By 2011, Watkins' drug use had consumed him. He recorded little. He missed rehearsals. But online, he was more active than ever, spiraling into chat rooms that would later become evidence of his crimes. Some of the messages were so disturbing that even detectives who later reviewed them said they couldn't sleep for days. Behind the stage lights, Ian Watkins had turned his fame into a weapon, using it to attract, isolate, and exploit. Yet somehow no one stopped him. His bandmates, though increasingly concerned, didn't have proof of what he was doing. Friends saw him with new women constantly. Fans who seemed too young, too eager, too lost in the fantasy of proximity to fame. The music industry, as always, stayed quiet. A rock star's chaos sold records, and Watkins knew it. He told one associate, "They'll never believe it. I'm famous. I'm untouchable." The arrogance wasn't just delusion, it was experience. For years, he'd watched the world forgive him everything. The police, too, had heard whispers. Complaints had been filed as early as 2008, including disturbing reports from former girlfriends. But without concrete evidence, the system stalled. It would take one final mistake, one forgotten laptop, to expose what Ian Watkins had truly become. In 2012, that computer would open the door to something investigators had never seen before. A secret life so depraved it would shock not only his fans, but the entire country. And when the screen finally lit up, the images inside would destroy the illusion of Ian Watkins forever. It was September 21st, 2012, in the Welsh town of Pontypridd. What began as a routine drug raid on a known addict's hotel room turned into one of the most disturbing discoveries in British criminal history. When police entered the Premier Inn where Ian Watkins was staying, they expected to find narcotics, cocaine, meth, maybe weapons. What they found instead would horrify even the most experienced officers. Among piles of drug paraphernalia lay multiple laptops, phones, and USB drives, all encrypted, all hidden under his mattress. Detectives, suspecting evidence of drug trafficking, confiscated everything. But when digital forensic teams began decrypting the files, what appeared on the screen stunned them. There were videos, conversations, images, thousands of them, and none of them were about drugs. The evidence showed that Watkins had been engaging in criminal sexual acts with minors, crimes so graphic that investigators later described them as beyond comprehension. Even worse, he hadn't acted alone. Messages revealed he had manipulated two female fans, both mothers, into participating and facilitating the abuse of their own children. Watkins had turned fame into leverage, coercion into obedience. The discovery was so severe that the police immediately contacted the South Wales Child Protection Unit. In the following days, a chain of arrests swept through his circle. The two women, later identified only by initials to protect their children, were detained. Watkins was charged under the Protection of Children Act with multiple counts of conspiracy to engage in sexual activity with minors, possession of indecent images, and attempted rape. As the evidence poured in, one question echoed through the investigation: how had this gone unnoticed for so long? Forensic analysts unearthed messages stretching back years, online chats, encrypted texts, secret forums. In them, Watkins bragged about his access, his untouchable status, and his obsession with pushing boundaries. Detectives would later testify that his arrogance was chilling. He wasn't hiding, he was documenting. When the charges were made public, the reaction was immediate and disbelieving. Fans flooded social media insisting it had to be fake, a setup, a smear campaign. Even those who knew him personally were in denial. He was messed up, one roadie said, but that? No way. But as the evidence became undeniable, shock gave way to horror. Lostprophets disbanded almost overnight. Their albums were pulled from stores. Radio stations banned their music. Overnight, Watkins' legacy collapsed, and the band's history was erased alongside it. The trial that followed in 2013 lasted weeks, but the confession came quickly. On November 26, 2013, in Cardiff Crown Court, Ian Watkins pleaded guilty to 13 sexual offenses, including the attempted rape of a baby. The courtroom fell silent as the details were read. Even seasoned journalists left the room in tears. Watkins showed no emotion. He simply turned to the cameras and smirked. The judge, Mr. Justice Royce, called his crimes unimaginable depravity and sentenced him to 29 years in prison plus 6 years extended supervision. Outside the courthouse, people stood stunned, not cheering, not jeering, just quiet. Because this was not a scandal, it was a wound. A generation that had once screamed his lyrics was now left asking how their idol had hidden such monstrosity in plain sight. And yet, as the world tried to move on, investigators began to notice something deeply unsettling. Many of the digital files they had seized were incomplete. Folders were missing. Drives had been erased. And some of the individuals Watkins had communicated with were never identified. It was as if someone, or something, had been helping him all along. The monster had been unmasked. But what if the mask was only one layer deep? The trial of Ian Watkins wasn't just another headline. It was a reckoning. When the guilty pleas were entered in November 2013, shock gave way to something deeper. Disbelief that such evil could hide behind fame, and for so long. The courtroom itself felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a national confession. Prosecutors detailed evidence so vile that journalists were warned not to repeat it on air. Even veteran reporters cried. The judge described Watkins' crimes as so depraved that words failed to describe them. In a single moment, the line between celebrity and criminal collapsed. Outside the courthouse, silence hung heavy. Fans who had once tattooed his lyrics on their arms tore posters from their walls. Parents who'd once let their teenagers attend Lostprophets concerts now held those same kids tighter. Lostprophets as a band ceased to exist. Its members, though innocent, were swallowed by the shadow of what their singer had done. Former guitarist Lee Gaze said years later, "It was like waking up to find your entire life was built on a lie." Across Britain, radio stations blacklisted the group. Record stores destroyed unsold copies of their albums. Music magazines that once praised Watkins now refused to print his name. But even as the world turned away from him, questions remained. How had it taken so long for justice to catch up? In 2008, multiple women had already contacted police about Watkins' disturbing messages and drug use. Yet no investigation went forward. Officers admitted later that early complaints were lost in the system. It was a failure that echoed across institutions. Police, music industry, even the fans themselves. Because Watkins hadn't just hidden, he'd been enabled. A system built to idolize had blinded itself to the monster it created. After the verdict, activists called for reforms in child protection and celebrity accountability, urging social media platforms and music labels to act faster when red flags appear. But change came slowly. In 2019, Watkins was attacked in prison after reports that he had been corresponding with fans again, proof that even behind bars, the cult of personality hadn't died. And maybe that's what made the case so terrifying. Not just what he did, but how easy it was for people to believe he never could. Fame had protected him, trust had sustained him, and innocence, not his, but ours, had been the ultimate victim. But long after the cell door closed, investigators would uncover something that proved the story of Ian Watkins wasn't over. Not yet. After the verdict, the world thought it finally understood Ian Watkins. A fallen rock star, a predator behind bars, case closed. But as investigators continued to sift through his digital footprint, they realized the story wasn't just about one man's crimes. It was about everyone who saw and stayed silent. On missed warnings and institutional failure. Between 2008 and 2011, police across South Wales received multiple complaints about Watkins. Former partners and fans reported disturbing messages, drug use, and explicit videos involving minors. Yet every time the reports stalled, officers later admitted files were misclassified or lost due to data transfer errors. In one chilling instance, a former girlfriend delivered a hard drive to police, claiming it contained evidence of serious abuse. It sat unexamined for over a year. When internal investigators later reviewed the timeline, they found at least 5 separate opportunities to intervene, all missed. The Independent Police Complaints Commission, IPCC, would eventually conclude that South Wales police failed to act on credible intelligence. But for Nicole's victims, and for the public, that conclusion came far too late. The enablers around him. In the music industry, whispers had circulated for years. Crew members spoke about parties that felt wrong, fans being escorted backstage with no ID checks, and Watkins boasting that no one would ever touch him. One insider, speaking anonymously to The Guardian, said, "Everyone knew he was messed up. We just didn't know how deep it went. And we didn't want to." Those close to him said the same. Watkins had become so powerful within his own brand that confronting him meant losing your job, your access, your place in the empire he built. Some of his closest allies have since expressed guilt. One tour manager admitted, "There were nights I thought, this isn't normal, but you tell yourself it's just rock and roll. That's how it hides." The fan network. Perhaps the most disturbing discovery came not from within the industry, but from the fan base itself. Watkins had created an online subculture, a web of private social media accounts and encrypted groups where he manipulated devoted followers. Investigators later revealed that several fans had actively participated in sharing explicit material at his request, believing they were part of a private club. It was exploitation disguised as fandom. Devotion turned into complicity. Law enforcement traced conversations across platforms, Facebook, Skype, and even early encrypted forums. Some users vanished as soon as the case broke, deleting years of correspondence. To this day, not all participants have been identified. 4. The prison years and the unsettling continuation. In 2019, reports emerged that Watkins was caught with a mobile phone inside prison, allegedly used to contact female fans and exchange explicit messages. The news sent a shockwave through the public. How could a convicted predator still manipulate others from inside a maximum security facility? An internal investigation found multiple security breaches and suggested that Watkins may have received assistance from other inmates and possibly staff. Officials denied any organized cover-up but admitted the case highlighted severe procedural weaknesses. Watkins was punished with 10 additional months added to his sentence, a minor extension for what many saw as a major failure. But the media's role in its silence. During the height of his fame, the British music press adored Ian Watkins. He was charismatic, quotable, the perfect anti-hero for glossy magazine spreads. After his arrest, many outlets quietly deleted old interviews, erasing their complicity. Some journalists later confessed that their editors had ignored early tips about Watkins' dangerous private life for fear of legal backlash. As one reporter told BBC Wales, "We could have asked harder questions, but no one wants to be the journalist who kills the headline act." The result was collective denial, a silence polished by profit. 6. The questions that still linger. Today, experts in criminology point to the Watkins case as a textbook example of institutional blindness. How charisma and celebrity warp accountability. Dr. Sarah Goodwin, a forensic psychologist, said, Watkins weaponized trust. The system wasn't built to stop someone like him because it still struggles to believe that fame and danger can live in the same person. Even in prison, his ability to attract attention remains unsettling. Letters continue to arrive from fans, some condemning him, others disturbingly affectionate. For law enforcement, that's the lingering nightmare. Not just what Ian Watkins did, but what he represented. The proof that evil can thrive when fame becomes armor. 7. The network that protected silence. Watkins once said in an interview, "I'll never fade away. People need their villains." And in a twisted way, he was right. His case revealed something about our culture, how society builds monsters and then feeds them attention. The police failed. The industry looked away. The fans refused to see. And through it all, Watkins stood on stage, smiling, knowing that as long as the music played, the truth could wait. But the music stopped. And now what's left is the echo of all the chances that were missed. Years later, new forensic evidence and digital archives would force Britain to reopen the question everyone thought was settled. What if the story of Ian Watkins still isn't over? On 12th October 2025, the story of Ian Watkins took its final shocking twist. In HMP Wakefield, one of Britain's highest security prisons in West Yorkshire, Watkins was assaulted and later died from his injuries. The press confirmed the death. The murderer remains unidentified, and the investigation is ongoing. The man who once filled stadiums, belted out anthems, and captivated millions had died behind bars, not by sentencing or time, but by violence. His death forces us to confront the full arc: rise, fall, exposure, and now, finality. Digital forensic teams, still holding layers of his encrypted data, continue to unearth new files. Chat logs, addresses, identities of people he once communicated with. Many remain nameless. The silence that protected him for years is now giving way to echoes that refuse to be forgotten. For some former fans, his death is a grim punctuation mark, not redemption. Survivors have expressed relief, anger, and sorrow, and a renewed demand: no silence, no forgetting. To many legal scholars, Watkins's violent end inside prison walls underscores a grim truth. Justice is never only about courts, it's about systems and how they break. Today he lies dead, but the wounds he inflicted, the lives he shattered, and the questions left unanswered live on. Because when an idol becomes a monster and then dies in darkness, what remains is not closure, but a challenge. How many more cases begin with applause and end in shadows? How many predators are still hidden behind fame, waiting for time to hide their tracks? And perhaps most urgently, if a man can die behind bars, yet so much of his truth still remains unspoken, then whose justice is this, really? His death may close a chapter. The book of his victims, of institutional failure, of cultural blindness, is far from finished.